Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on today's episode.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's always
Um,
fun when you get to get together.
you have a different background than I think what most people would probably typically look into in today's age. And the reason I say that is because everyone is focused in on the concept of technology, but you come from a contracting background. And I'm interested to have the conversation of like the blue collar work, white collar work, technology versus
Yeah,
still having the craftsmanship skills. But with that being said, I did want to say thank you again for joining us on today's
happy to be
podcast.
here.
To give us a little bit of understanding, you have multiple years in the contracting space. You help other people, create the most efficient systems for their contracting business. You also showed equity in, the company that you were with as well, too. And at the age of 48, you were living the life at that point, right? Help
Yeah.
our viewers understand a little bit more about who is Al, what is this whole concept of, being a contractor, and then also this phenomenal book you have as well, which I want to dive a little bit deeper into today.
Yeah, I tell you, the I was the third generation, along with my two older brothers, to enter our business. At one time, we just did heating, fuel oil in the Northeast, which is like
Mhm.
propane. And then we realized that if we didn't start selling more products and services to better serve our customers who were
Mhm.
calling us because they loved us and wanted us to do more, and we were saying, no, that's not what we do. Finally, I just said, you know what, we better stop that because otherwise we're going to put our competition in our own customer's basement. So
Yeah.
that led us to do gas heating, then air conditioning, then plumbing, and then finally electrical. So now I'm pleased to say the fourth generation is there. My brother is there with his son, which is my nephew, who's the fourth generation in the business. And that really takes systems to be able to generational jump from place to place. Because I was at my own company, anybody who's been in any family business, you know that by the time you're 8 years old, you're doing something, whether it's sweeping up, cleaning, dumping baskets. In my case, my dad, we were 70 people, but he would still get calls in the middle of the night when we were young, and he would gather up his boys and pop them in the car. And we would go to a bakery or nursing home or whatever. And we loved it, but we could never understand why he wasn't so thrilled about being awoken in the middle of the night. That really describes, especially the nature of contracting is, it's not a 9 to 5 job. Now, during COVID, all of a sudden contractors thought, well, I can't get people, so I'm just going to cut my hours to nothing. And I said, I get that, but would you be okay if your mom called me, her plumbing company, because the third floor toilet just exploded and water's cascading down the steps, to say, I know that it snapped tonight, Saturday. We'll see you Monday.
Yeah, you don't want to lose out on that kind of opportunity.
No, not only that, think of a black eye,
Yeah.
how much of a black eye is. So one of the things about us is that we always had more calls,
Mm.
people asking for our services than we could do. But ultimately, we stopped trying to get ready-made talent, which applies to every, including the technology, absolutely. But the reality is, and if I'll have a funny story if you bring me back to SEO in a minute. But
Okay.
yeah, so we really decided that, you know what, if we can take willing people with no skills to willing techs with great skills, we win, and everyone else is going to struggle to catch up to us. But it also was all about, I had read a book called The Employer of Choice decades ago. And I said to my brothers, we will be the employer of choice if we can really mean the following. We offer careers, not a job, because no
Mhm.
one was doing it. And that was really the segmental change. We got people on board that were much more pleasant to deal with, much more trained up. We knew what they could do. And
Mhm.
a key word that I learned along the way is released. You
Okay.
really need your employees released. And released means I don't take your word that you can do it, because in an interview, I know what you did.
Facts.
Yeah,
Got to
fact.
see
So,
it.
and they're definitely afraid that you're going to find out. A couple of things here is we basically said, we're not going to assume anything anymore. We're going to go through the tasks that we do that are laid out in our operating manuals, which think of it as like a playbook for a football team, so that you know how to fill your position, whatever that position is on the field. And we're going to teach you how to do it our way. We're going to take you into our hands-on training center where we can make it real life. And we're going to go through it together. So whatever you don't know, it's not
Yeah.
my fault, not yours, which was, you could just see their level of anxiety just drop because
That's
they had
good.
been hiding all of this. Now, with new people, I didn't have to rewire them because they were a clean slate, which was really
Correct.
wonderful. And I created this whole pipeline. So got so good, coming around 23 years into my full-time career. So in other words, I was official and things were sailing along. And I said, you know what, I'd like to go off around the country because I know this will work with others. And I know that when I step out, this is still going to keep rolling along. I have not been back to my own business. When I say it, obviously see my family all the time, but
Yeah.
I've not been back inside the business, and it's 22 years now, and they're still rocking and rolling, which is
That's
a tribute
incredible.
to, systems and things of that nature. But for me, this whole idea of being able to, have a systematic platform is what I talk about. And it actually goes back to plumbing because when I would go to people's houses, they wanted to build their master bathroom up in the, the stuff. And I go, okay, well, I need to go to the basement. They go, but the bathroom's going to be upstairs. And I go, I know. And if it
That's why we
doesn't
gotta
have
go.
what I need in the basement, it's not going to work upstairs. And this
Correct.
again applies to technology. I was raised in a family that was always on the cutting edge of technology. And it's going to sound weird because our company was started in 1936, but my dad and my uncle,
Wow.
two-way radios in the truck when everybody was using phone booths on the corner. And then we went to Nextels, and then we were the first to computerize all of this stuff. So I believe in it. I think technology with a purpose is what I really would stress. Just technology for technology's sake is not going to get anything really done.
No.
And then the other thing I was just discussing with my IT team was technology works when you know what the technology does and you have practiced it.
That is true. That is very true. And a lot of people don't take the time to grasp that. I want to pull back some because one, you dropped so many different key pieces in that one chat where one, there was an opportunity that your current clientele loved what you were doing. They wanted more, not in the sense of just wanting more, but because it was also congruent to what you already were doing or like some of the same similar problems. So there was a need that came about, and you guys looked at it to where it's like, okay, we can either have them go to our competition, or we can then figure out a way to bring this in-house as an extension to our business to then keep the LTV longer, right? The lifetime value of customers. And I think that's a constant conversation some people are having to where it's like, you don't want to add too many services to your businesses because then you don't really become great at something.
I so agree with you saying, Jay. So agree with that. Yeah.
So with that, right? But I mean, at a point as you're building and you're growing, it's by nature you're going to have these more I won't say you should, to each their own, have these extensions. How did you guys combat that to where it's like, hey,
that's such a great point because I've counseled so many people on this thing, and really, when you get started and you had the entrepreneurial seizure where you go off and I'm going to go in my own business, going to be my own boss, not knowing what you don't know, because most of us, if we really knew, we wouldn't go. They go, I'm in this business, I'm in this business, I'm in this business. And I said, how many of them are profitable? And how many of them are repeatable? And they said, before you think I'm criticizing you, you did exactly what you need to do when you are a startup. Your job is to say yes and figure out how to do it. But as you earn the right, because now you have more calls than you can humanly do in a day, which is a very good thing, you get to decide when you raise your prices as to who you will work for and who you won't, where they are living, and what can you bring to them that the competition can't, because you always want to be niche. You never want to be commodity. The business that I mentioned originally, what I talked about being in fuel oil heating, which is like propane heating. When you woke up on Long Island, there were 2,000 competitors you could have called besides me. Talk about being a commodity. And my whole job was to get us to a niche.
Wow. So did you guys have like I'm assuming you did have a little bit of, not necessarily argument, but some heated discussions when it came to like the expansion part? Or was it like a no-brainer to where it's like, this makes sense. All right, let's go for it and just try it out.
Yeah. When it came time, and we were lucky enough to have great mentors that had a bigger perspective view.
Okay.
Because one of the great lines my dad told me, he goes, way you stand on the bridge informs how you see the world. So we were in our own insulated, Long Island, even though it's 115 miles tip to tip. That's all we knew.
Yeah.
We didn't know about anything else. And woke up defining ourselves as
Correct.
this business. And then our customers were going, hey, do you do this? And then, so the question we really said is, and this was very key to this for us, was plumbing, gas heating, air conditioning, electric, all made sense as we continued to build on. But we had already mastered the secret. Secret was creating the operating manual that covers the 80% of what goes on, not the 20% weird, how we do our work. And then building a hands-on training center that acts like what you would encounter in the field, and have a course curriculum that we would train them on ourselves, so that we could get them to get that additional skill, so that they were cross-trained and skilled. So anyway, it comes up, I have a competitor, a really great competitor, who frankly dragged me along. And I started out,
That's healthy.
Jay, I started out hating their guts, and I had never met them. But, they dressed better. They were, professional on the phone. I mean, just things that, at that time was like mind-blowing. Anyway, they were in the same business, and now all of a sudden they go into security alarms because they wanted this lifetime value and the money always rolling in. And I turned to my two older brothers and I go, I just fixed your heating system. You want me to touch your alarm system?
Yeah, like,
I think not. Yeah, no. So what do we need to do? And then we instantly knew what it is. We had a friend who was in the security business, home alarms. And we knew how he worked because we had recommended him for years, and he recommended us. And so we just sat down at lunch one day and said, let me ask you, do you want to be in the plumbing, heating, cooling, electric business? He goes, oh, absolutely not. Okay, well, there's the good thing. We don't want to be in the security business either. And if we can go to our customers and go, do you want the heating guy to fix your security business thing? Or do you want your security guy to fix your heating stuff? If not, we have a great person. We've already got this arrangement that's going to make you better. So that actually became a business we didn't want to go into, but we could still provide, and provide in a better way than that who we were competing with. So as you listening out there are thinking about, what do I bolt on? What do I add on? What do I do? First, what Jay's talking about is master what you do, but then you can talk about bolting on. Now, do I believe my way is the only way? Absolutely not. But do I absolutely believe it works? I've got so many years of history. More importantly than my history, what have I been doing for the last 22 years is traveling all over the United States, Canada, bringing this to people in trades that I was never in. Garage doors, kitchen cabinetry, commercial roofing, condo builder in Montreal. I have never built a condo in my entire life. Photographer, a commercial photographer who did school things. She actually reached out to me, and she's trying to hire me. And so I go, listen, I can shoot pictures, and I actually took a photography course, but why me? She goes, I've read all your stuff.
correct.
Your technicians are my photographers. Your dispatcher is the same person who gets to decide which schools they go to. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, I think the concept that you're reaching on is like the concept of like principles, right? It's like if you have the principles correct, you can dress up the other stuff to wherever you want, because the foundation of everything will be aligned. And that's like when you're talking about those systems, those are the nice pieces. Once you nailed that down, yeah, there might be some changes, some alterations, but you have that 80% that you mentioned, which this is a great book, 80-20 rule. But that's what you're, at least for what I'm hearing, you're just talking about the principles. Have the principles down, and whatever you're doing, everything else can then.
Principles practiced.
Yes, there we go. I like that. Principles.
Yeah, so that it's repeatable, that you can, and the test of it is, frankly, once we had all this stuff, the only way you really know
Correct.
is you literally have to go away and find out what happens when you're gone.
You're not there.
Yes.
I like that.
And most owners, it's like they're hanging onto the steering wheel with their fists clenched because they just like go anywhere, even though we have self-driving cars, like my Tesla that's sitting in the garage. Now, I don't know if you listen to this Tesla. I really love my Tesla, but I don't just sit there like this with my arms across my chest, leaning back. No, my hands are right on the wheel, and my foot is
close by.
but it's self-helping you drive. How's that?
Correct. Yeah.
The point of this is that, your business, absolutely, you want to get it to automatic. Does that mean you disappear? Do you just live on a beach? Well, that would be great. And I'm sure there's ways to do that. It's not what I come from, and it's not what I've taught. And again, I don't say, disparage anybody else if that works for you, but that means you have rocking tight systems. And they are rocking tight, not because you are there every moment of every second of every day, micromanaging them to death. And that's really what really separates you.
Right.
And then it liberates you up. And I will share with you while it's floating through my head, Jay, in this rant, is that
You're doing good.
yeah. So I had a great industry friend. His name was Dan Holohan, and he really was a mentor. And the great news is he wasn't in my day-to-day business, obviously. So when you are not standing in the swamp, it's a whole lot easier to tell what's going wrong in the swamp than when you're in it. And so he said to me one day, he says, it's time because we have things running. Here's what I want you to do at the end of the day. It's called business meditation. Business meditation? What? He goes, yeah, I want at the end of the day, 15 minutes spent this way. And it's what business am I in? What business should I be in? And what business should I be leaving? And so I practiced that over and over again because that really, speaking to what you're talking about, bolting on, expanding, all of these things comes down to those 15 minutes of really just thinking about it. Now, he was a great reader, which is why he was a great trainer as well. And I was lucky enough to call him my best friend as far as best mentor. And, he said to me, he had a tendency, Jay, of calling me up on what he knew was my busiest day.
Shocker.
Yeah. So he knew it was my busiest day. It was ice cold outside, busy. And he would start and go, hey, are you busy? He knew the answer. But he did it on purpose because he wanted to grab me by my shirt collar and make me pay attention. And he goes, you really need to be focusing on what it takes to make this really run the way that it needs to run. He said, because otherwise you're never free to be directing your business. You're always being dragged. He said, either get out in front of the parade or be prepared to be run over it over and over again.
I think there's so many things that's coming to mind in that. I remember hearing a guy named Jay Waller. He talked about the one time he realized he didn't have the systems in place is he went to vacation. He couldn't really be on vacation because he's just constantly talking. He's like, he got it to the point where he can see a report of just 11 items. And from those 11 items, without even talking to anybody, he knew exactly what the health was. He knew exactly what people were doing. Didn't have to have contact. He said, I can fully be on vacation doing nothing. See this report, and I knew exactly where everything needed to be, or that things were running smoothly or not. And it's interesting because the concept I got from when you were talking about the lady doing the plumbing is the problem was up at the top, but you're like, hey, I need to go to the basement. And I think that's conceptually the same concept when people look at their business or their life to where it's like, hey, they have this thing, but what happened in the foundation? What's happening in the roots? And like, can we take a look there first? Because typically the foundation is the problem, not the actual issue at the beginning.
We used to say in our contracting trade that rarely is the problem where the customer is telling you. Yeah, they hear this noise here, but it wasn't generated here. That's just where it is. And so to explain that to people that I was training at my own company and then other companies is if you go to a doctor and you tell them your finger hurts and they don't check your heart, get up and leave. Because, maybe it is your finger, but we've got to make sure we're controlling whatever the things beyond and take our blindfolds off that we have. And especially at our own company, we all wear blindfolds. We all do. And I think the big thing about that is having a mentor that you can trust that can come in with perspective and tell you what you don't want to hear. I call that holding up the truth mirror. And I was lucky enough to have friends who would hold up the truth mirror to me and tell me what I didn't really want to hear, but I absolutely needed to hear.
And that's tough love. I won't say it's tough love. It's just, I tell people that's just real. That's truth. And if you don't have those kind of people, I try to call them like the people in your council that's willing to do so. Again, you might want to evaluate.
You might want to change your circle. I would say that for sure.
Circle.
Yeah, no. And you also have to ask yourself, why can't you take it?
That's the biggest one.
Why can't you take it? And, what are you so desperately protecting? And is it because it's always been that way? Again, I stepped into a business that had already been going 40, 50 years by the time I arrived. So it's easy to let inertia just keep riding you along. but I was not born that way. And I went off to engineering school. And even though I was in engineering school, I was still working 6 months a year in the business. But it taught me, really about the better you define any problem, the closer you are to solving it. That was one of the big things. And then you can consider the whole problem solving scenarios and get it wide before you go narrow. And this process to this day is still really critical to it. But you want to set up what I call the railroad tracks for your business or the foundation for your business. And that is more alike than unlike. So now's the time to tell the SEO story.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm curious about that. I feel like that's a great leadway to the SEO and then also to the just 7 overall powers. But let's talk about this SEO. I want to hear this story.
So my franchise partners, we owned the Zoom Drain franchise that went nationwide, and it's still going on. It's just I sold my share because I reached a certain point where I couldn't. I told my 2 partners who wanted me to stay, I just go, unless there's a time machine, I've got to go. There's only so much that I've got. This is not a lack of faith. This is everything I wanted, and I appreciate the opportunity. But anyway, we were struggling with the SEO company that was supporting us at that time. And my partner said, you got to get on a plane and you got to go down there and go fix that company. So that's what I did. And so I worked with them and I was observing and talk about technology. I had a really good sense of technology, programming computers at an early age, all of that stuff. But as to the SEO, I was talking to the owners, trying to get a good feel and seeing the chaos. There's a time for somebody to be on site because you got to see it. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And then I said, so do we have a checklist for this? And the owners go, no, absolutely not. It's too different. Nobody has it. And then one of the young guys just says, what are you talking about? We have a 19-page checklist on how to do this thing. So I said, well, number one, it's bad that you 2 owners have no idea that you have a checklist that these guys are all doing. And the second thing is, if you have a 19-page checklist, you have 0 chance of everybody constantly following that. So good and bad news there. And speaking to this is kind of the same thing. It was because it kept writing stuff for, I did this job, let's put it in here. I did this job, let's put it in here. All of a sudden, it was anything but the 80%. It was all of the weirdness that had gone on. And it drifted way off of where they should have been. They needed to do north.
God, wow. I had an experience like that one time working with a startup and it threw me so off, I decided to leave them because I was like, there's no way this is this disconnected. But then the 2, like what you're getting at is keeping track of like the certain steps or KPIs is this out of whack to where it's not.
I hear you, Jay. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I hear you, Jay, because when you said about the 11 things that guy knew, those were his 11 KPIs that moved the needle one way or the other. The problem that I see now, speaking to technology, which again, it's a double-edged sword. It used to be, 1 big computer, then now it's 2 computer screens. And now all of a sudden I walk into shops, it looks like you're walking into the NASA Space Center because there's 100 of them. And it's just too many things yelling at you at the same time. Whereas you need 4 to 5 KPIs for each of the boxes on the org chart because companies should not be built top down. They should be built bottom up. At the very top level, their first, second, and third job is to train up the people beneath them so that they can own their box and get them set up so that they can graduate with training to the next box. And if you do that, the culture is so much better and the results are so much better. Profitability is better. Everything is better. But right now, if you don't do that, you think you're going to hire this magic person who's going to come in and fix your dysfunctional business. And you may get lucky. Maybe that magic person can do that. But what happens if that magic person is not paying attention and crosses the street and gets hit by the bus? Well, bad for him and his family, but bad for you because there's nothing there. And that's what we kind of always stressed. Also, the other thing about it, if you don't train the people that report to the top level management, they have the right to keep doing this all day.
Correct.
Yeah, you got a minute? Yeah, you got a minute? So when people ask me, I don't know where my day goes. I go, I know where it goes. So at a time. People come to your door because you haven't trained them up. You haven't got them released. They're not equipped to own their box.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of leaders lack in, right? And it's like they'll get upset with the employer where it's like, no, this is back to that truth mirror. And that's okay. but let's just figure this out to where anyone can step in, no matter if it's from a different department or if it's just a whole new candidate to make it. But I think that goes back to the concept where it's like, and this maybe is a stretch, to where it's like, hey, if you can't explain something to a kindergartner, you don't know, the actual information. And it's like the same thing. It's like,
I do love that. I'll take it up a half a notch. I was watching a documentary about the genius of Ulysses S. Grant in warfare. They have to understand there are no walkie-talkies, there's no communication, just talking, right? Or passing notes. And so he needed to get a message down the line. He said most commanders wanted to speak to their smartest person so that they would go out and disseminate it. He looked for somebody who was probably his least intelligent person, explained it to him, and then had him explain it back to him. And then when he was convinced that this person understood it, he goes, well, everybody down the line's got a better shot. And then even when I talk about writing, when I ended up doing a lot of writing, I tried to write to an 8th grade level. And that's because, again, my friend coached me on that. He goes, if you write at an 8th grade level, smart people will not be insulted. They'll enjoy the clarity of your speaking, of your writing. And those who are struggle with reading, and I'm dyslexic, so I struggled my whole life before we even knew it was a thing. So yeah, that's really our communications. We fall in love speaking back to technology. Yeah. When I learned finally, to become a tech and really be good at it, I love to impress customers with all the tech speak, that they would be super impressed. And then somebody tapping on the shoulder and goes, they don't know what you're talking about.
Nope, not at all. I've had that experience plenty of times. Plenty of times I have that communication because we also help integrate some AI automations into companies, and they're just like, I just want to know if it's going to work, if it's going to take care of the problem. I'm like, yes, it will. Don't worry.
Yeah, and that's really, actually, I have a tip for the audience that's listening. When you do have something technical, and you want to explain it in what I call plain English, you need a bridge word, and the bridge word that I was taught was the word like. So you take something that's complicated. And then, so we had this thing that controlled the water temperature of boilers. And, we would talk about the ohms and the resistance, and then people's eyes were going back in their head, right? And then I said, we have this outdoor weather reset that adjusts itself to temperature. And you know what it's like? It's like when you're in your car and you set the automatic speed control, it knows what to do when it has to go up the hill, and it knows what it has to do going downhill. I sold a ton of those things. Yes, exactly. They'll lose the tech speak.
Yeah. I tell people, especially in sales, I'm like, look for the aha moments.
Yes.
Look in them moments where it clicks with them. Like, oh, okay. That's what you mean. Perfect. Now you got them hooked in. But with that being said, you said you try to write on the 8th grade level. And I want to kind of talk a bit about the book, The 7 Powers. Help us break down the concept and what really sparked the beginning of writing this.
Yeah. Well, I, again, was in engineering school, and it was so long ago. My now wife, 46 years, she had to correct my term papers. And she goes, did they teach you how to spell and write at all in New York City? And I go, well, you know what the New York City school system was like? No. So anyway, so the point of it is I needed to write a lot like I'm talking, and who is my audience so that I can connect with them. And as the reverse way world is, I ended up writing for trade magazines. I ended up, shooting blogs, doing all these things and videos. And then came time to put a book out there. And then, of course, put my programs online. So, because I couldn't travel the country and everywhere. Now the programs, frankly, are working in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States. That's what the great value of being able to do it online. But really, the book, I wanted to cement what I had been out going across the country for, at that point, probably 15 years, about this platform or foundation. Think of it as 7 building blocks.
Okay.
Whatever your company is today, and if it's any good, expanding to handle what you do. So there are 7: planning power, operating power, staffing power, sales coaching, marketing power, financial power. 7. And those 7 powers really starts with planning power, which is what I used to get paid to do first. And planning power is, I have been these guys. I know there was no shortage of ideas. And that was the old days when it was trade magazines and a few events and a few webinars. And now it's just every Facebook group that they're bombarded by. There's easily 100 times more events in our space, 100 more events that they have. So there's just what used to be a garden hose is now a fire hose of information flying at them. And so how do you process that? So what Planning Power attempts to do is get you working on the right thing at the right time in the right way, the 3 rights of planning. And that basically in a nutshell is, think of it as a funnel. All the great projects and habits that you and your company want to do all go to the top of the funnel in what I call the master project list. And the way they work their way down that list is they either fix your biggest problem or challenge, or the greatest chance for you to grow and be profitable. And you arrive at your top 30. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how big your company is. You cannot successfully work at 30 things at the same time. So you do exactly the same thing, and the same strainer, biggest problem or challenge, greatest chance of growing profitable, and you arrive at your top 5. And those 5 are well-defined so that there's a beginning and end and understanding. So like what you wouldn't do is go marketing. And what I would tell guys is, I know you want more calls, but if you say marketing, do you think you're ever going to stop marketing? It would never move. Why don't you say direct mail postcard campaign? Why don't you say SEO? Why don't you say whatever it is, these things, because there's beginning and ends. And when the 5 move, then 30 becomes to fill it in again. Looking back at the 30 is, okay, what's up next? But every week, no matter how crazy busy your your week was, inherent promises, you said these 5 things would fix your biggest problem or challenge or greatest chance to grow and be profitable. So you tell me, Jay, what were you doing this week that was more important than that?
Outside of the things that's going to move it forward?
Spending time to at least make this top 5 go.
Yeah.
You got to commit time to it.
Like me personally, if I would say, I was probably spending a little bit more time reconnecting with like family and friends than needed. Also potentially spending more time on creatives than that was needed. So like creative as far as like content, though that will be good and useful for the long haul, but I feel like I put more time and attention than what was needed on the planning side to just get it going. So I would say probably.
Yeah, and it's easy to get distracted.
Yeah.
It's easy to get distracted. There's one thing I will share though. The only way that you really can combat that is you have to take control of your calendar.
Yes.
Working in time blocks.
There's a saying.
That's what you can do is time blocking on your calendar, and everyone has digital calendars where you put multiple reminders and things of that nature. Like I do, I still do to this day. I actually have what I call meeting with me every Sunday. If I haven't worked on my top 5, this is my last chance to spend a good hour, preferably 2 hours, working on making the top 5 come to life.
I like that. There's 2 things that come to mind that I heard where I wish I remember this guy's name, but he basically I think he coined the concept where it's like be a student to your calendar or student to your schedule or something like that.
I'm not saying be a slave to your calendar.
Exactly. Like, I think that's basically what he was saying.
But yeah, but no, we have trained people, this used to be a Word document that I was talking about, that master project, top 30, top 5.
Right.
And then we, of course, moved it to project management software like Trello or Monday. Those are all great, Jay. I love those because you can put pictures and things of that nature. But what myself and Ellen, we co-consulted and we're co-franchised together. We knew that just because it's on that project management board doesn't make it come to life. If it's not on your calendar or their calendar, you have no shot of making those come to life.
And do you feel like most people out, because you have these 7 different powers, right? Do you believe that the planning portion is typically where you see a lot of people fail at, or a lot of the contractors fail at, or is it somewhere else? Or maybe is it based on like where they are in their journey?
It really depends on where they are in their journey. But, for me, Planning Power, no one that I worked with was not better served by having this thing lined up and understanding this concept and the work to go through it. They may have known there's certain things that they needed to do. And knowing is great. Doing is more important.
Correct.
And so having this platform and how to work through it. And when I was doing it early on, I used to call them up like your dad. And you know how your dad would say, let me see your homework. Nobody checks your homework. The chances of us sliding is a little bit. So I was the accountability coach, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
You do need that because otherwise, it was a nice idea that went to die. So planning really gets it. And then I would move on to operating power, which was the series of org charts, the box org chart, the depth chart, the flow of communication. And the box org chart is basically the bingo board, and then having a manual that covers the 80% of what goes on. And then a trade manual. In our case, we had a plumbing manual, heating manual, cooling, electrical manual. In the case of the company, they had a CEO manual when I left. SEO manual.
Yeah.
And these are the things that really begin to move you along. Staffing, which being the ability to take and leverage that so that I can take willing apprentices all the way up the career ladder. Sales training, which of course is, how many steps are in your process? And when I ask that question, they go, what process? So, and I get it. The only other worst answer than what process is, you mean our 50-step process?
That is true.
Yeah, because no one's going to do it. I feel you can do a 3-step, 5-step, 7-step, 10-step. If you can't get it done in 10 steps, or if you need more than 10 steps, then no one is going to be able to follow it in any, really good order.
Correct.
And I believe sales leads to marketing. And the reason I stress this is because if you are my ideal customer and I don't know what makes you tick and I can't sell you what you need and want, then how am I going to do that to 100 J's, 1,000 J's, 1,000,000 J's?
Correct.
The answer is everything will be done. So your marketing, when you blame your marketing sometimes, it's because your sales skills are weak. You follow?
I do. And I have this continuous conversation because that's where I mostly stay in, more the marketing and sales, not too much on the fulfillment kind of product engineering side. And it's always which one came first, chicken or egg? So
yes,
it's constantly it's constantly blaming the one. So it's
I actually had a chicken and egg conversation with Ellen, the person I was talking about, as coach.
Really?
And she would be sitting in there. She always, passenger seat, would ask these. And one day she says to me, she goes, what comes first, sales or marketing? And I go, sales. She goes, well, if you're not good at marketing, the phone doesn't ring, you're going out of business. And I go, and if you're not good at sales, the phone's going to ring and you're just going to blow up every opportunity that you get.
I love this because I personally lean more towards the sales side, just because that's like the skill set I really hone.
Most of us grew up having to make a sale. It's a great thing because the problem is all of a sudden we go, well, I don't know about marketing. That's not my thing. I didn't go to I'm not saying you need to be the marketing guy when you come up with the program, but your marketing vendors, they are completely in trouble if you haven't defined the 4 to 5 KPIs. One, you haven't defined how much goes into the marketing budget in an objective way. Allocation, which is the 3 main drivers that you go to work with, that are going to resonate with your target audience or audiences. And then where everyone messes up is, coming back to what you'll enjoy hearing next, is the need for a marketing calendar.
Yeah.
Because you're busy, and all of a sudden the phone goes dead and you pick it up and you go, what happened to the phone? It's too late. And so the marketing calendar is actually populated backwards through the year so that you're lining up testimonials, you have turn it on, turn it off marketing. You've got a lot of this stuff literally, on the old expression, on the shelf, so that you're being driven through the year this way.
I like that. And do you think that's like a common struggle with like trade businesses? Is it the marketing and sales, or is it like just like labor shortages? What do you think is pretty common?
I created the 7 powers, which to me was like a revelation, because I thought there were 7 million things I had to get right. And everyone else is in the same things. Goes, it's not 7 million. No, it's 7 main things. Now you'll be spending the rest of your life on this thing. And so, but the 7 powers is really it. And one day I was watching Anthony, who's the trainer, Tony Robbins. Yeah. So he's talking about, he's got a program, 30-day program that will change the rest of your life. And he's excited. And what he comes to realize is people don't want to invest 30 days to change the rest of their life. So he had to change it to 7 days to change the rest of your life. So for me, I was excited that there's this thin book that you can read, or you can listen to the Audible, and there's 7 powers. And I realized I really got to tell these people there's 2 things to do. So here's what I'm sharing with you. More calls, more texts. So let me explain what I mean by that. Is more calls is, think of a bathtub for a minute. The right amount of calls from the right customer at the right time. And your job is to overflow that tub, which is stressful. But then, as I mentioned, you can raise the price. You can decide what work you will and won't do. You can decide where you want to expand, if there's a new marketplace, any of that nature. But if you have bad sales, your bathtub train is wide open. So that's when, again, people blame their marketing company, but you have done a bad job of training. Right. And that's why you have to be able to close that up. So that's more calls. More techs are not warm bodies. They're service techs in our case, that are good at communication, which leads to great sales. They're neat and clean. The truck's neat and clean. The job site's neat and clean. Operationally great. And technically, they can. You have no heat today. Tomorrow, there better be heat because they can do that work. And you can apply that to anybody in the tech sector or whatever sector you are in. The same thing goes to this. And there's others where there's installers, which are people who are just fulfillment. Now, they don't control the sale. The sale's already been made. Their job, though, is to bring that job in on time, on budget, with no callbacks. And so they arrive at the job site the right way. They have great communication skills. They're neat and clean. The truck's neat and clean. The job site's neat and clean. And technically, they can do an expert install. But here's the catch. They also have to have good enough communication skills to make sure that the user understands how to use what they just did instead of just leaving them.
So it's back to that teaching, coaching, kind of educating side. At the end of the day, it's going to come back around to that, or at least it's just going to be a major pillar within the overall process. Correct.
So what's behind you is the kitchen, as an example. So I can do training in a classroom, do all day long, and it'll be good in the absence of no training. But if you want to acid test it, I'm going to bring a group of plumbers in there, and they're going to sell you. They're going to do the inspection. They're going to look at it, and they go, well, based on what I see here today, we need to replace the kitchen faucet. And while I'm at it, I saw the piping underneath the sink needs to be replaced. And they're able to convince you in a good way that you go ahead and do the work. And then you switch gears and they actually do the repair. Then they switch gears again and close it up with you. So you know what you did, why we did it, and how to work it. So we're not coming back here tomorrow for something stupid.
Correct. So what it sounds like is this, what typically has moved from just a technician standpoint has now have to be a more well-rounded individual. And I feel like that's happening more and more.
You got to talk. I have to admit, I'll keep you to watch the time, but when like I mentioned, I finally knew this stuff and I love to talk the technical language, but I remember being on a call where they had no hot water. Well, at least that's what I thought I heard, Jay. Standing there with my arms across my chest as the lady's talking to me, and I'm thinking to myself, lady, as soon as you stop talking, I can get busy because I wasn't listening. I'm the smartest person in the room. Go downstairs and I go, there's nothing wrong with this heater. I just checked everything and come back up and go, took care of it. Anyway, my service manager, who's like a real drill sergeant, goes, the lady that you were at yesterday, her home, she didn't say no hot water. If you had bothered to listen, she said she doesn't have hot water when she's running the sink and somebody flushes the toilet. Completely different. Learning to listen is indispensable, number one, but now it's totally non-negotiable.
That's so true. That reminds me when I was a fitness director overseeing my own location, and I would have my trainers as they're training. I'm like, make sure you're paying attention to other, not like just like intentionally, but be aware of other conversations that's happening around you. Or if you're just out and about, because I'm like, as much as we will make sure to get you, keep your calendars full with clients, you have the opportunity to bring in your own leads, which are easier to close, will give you a higher commission because you are the person that ultimately at the end of the day is going to be doing the thing. And that's what it sounds like as well. It's like
the referrals.
Yeah.
Who's the easiest customer to sell to? A referred customer.
That is true. I love that. Now, we have AI, we have all these technologies, and some people think it's going to replace them. I think what it is just going to I think it's going to replace people who don't understand how to utilize them. But I think it's also going to give opportunities for new roles and responsibilities and like quote unquote jobs to be created. I bring this up because you mentioned the conversation of like do more calls, do more text. Yeah. And I think if people understood that there is a way that you're going to be able to use this technology to then focus more on the parts that I don't say matter, but are more human centric, which I would believe in trade businesses is very human centric.
Yeah, we're in the lucky position. We didn't plan it, but it's going to be a long time till you are able to replace us as a robot to be able to on your roof and do the rest of the stuff. AI is very much at work at the really good companies all over the place, but they're smart enough to know it's AI, and nothing behind it. You know what I mean? Correct. And if you've ever called, like, and AI can do, if I just want to know, is my prescription ready at Walmart? AI is all I need. But if I
Mhm.
need some more detail, I need to be able to say representative and get to a human.
Mm.
And that's what people are starting to go, it's got to be all human or it's got to be all AI. And the answer is just like our work, in my belief, it should be
Correct.
more work from home, but not
Mhm.
strictly from home. And even in the case where you can work from home, culture is being broken, which is why
Mm.
people are beginning to return back to the office in a good way. Because years ago, what I came to realize is, yes, we go to work for the paycheck. Yes, we want to be able
Of
to get
course.
recognized and go up and do all the other stuff, but we actually come there as much for the social aspect as anything. And when we don't get that social aspect, it breaks culture.
Mm.
So that's on that end of it. But yeah, use every technology. But if you think you're just going to slash your workforce to
Of
nothing, and by the way, can I give you some perspective of how old this idea is?
course.
When we first computerized with an IBM 1160 or something back in 1970, we didn't ask, but the IBM guy goes, you're not going to need all these people. Well, guess what? They're all there. They're just doing, like you mentioned, different jobs, or we were
Correct.
freed up where they didn't have to do these stupid mundane tasks. And now they could do stuff that was better for everybody.
That's yeah. And I mean, do you see like as it's progressed, because there's definitely going to be areas of opportunity that is going to make
Oh,
it
yeah.
more efficient for people in the trade business. Do you see that it provides a better opportunity for these contractors to increase their values? Because it's going to be hard for a robot to be produced in order to do the work. So as you're making the systems more efficient, now having a human there to do it, is it like the demand goes up potentially, or
It's kind of like what I was saying about Tesla. It's a driver assist. And
yeah.
so like dispatchers who are dispatching all these techs that
Hmm.
need to go and trying to figure out how to maximize billable hours. Is that a term that everyone's
Yep.
familiar? Yeah. We also, that's a big, big thing for us. And it was always their, ability to look at the schedule and kind of figure it out. Well, dispatch software built in with the AI these days, there's really very few dispatchers who can compete with that because
Correct.
they see the bill. Now they can step in with, yeah, just because it's efficient, you sent the wrong guy to the
Oh,
job.
I've been
Yeah,
there. It's not fun.
yeah.
I used
So,
to.
it's driver assist is how I would say it. And
Got
it, and
you.
it absolutely, this is not a coming down the road. It's already here.
Yeah. I used to be a broker and doing freight logistics. So keeping track of certain things.
Yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm like, man, I wish some of this could just be
Yeah, and
automated.
it's true. Years ago, a really sharp friend of mine
Mm.
who was a service manager, he goes, Al, automate everything you can. And we were doing that. And now, of course, there's less verbal communication for that stuff. He goes, but at the end of the day, we as technicians are not the UPS driver where we just
Hmm.
go, drop the box, drop the box. We have to tell you that we arrived, the whole house was on fire. Now we put it out. Well, you should be
Correct.
telling me what?
Yeah. That's you have a point there. Now, I know we're wrapping up here pretty soon. Before we do so, I want people to know where can they find more information about yourself, about your resources, because you have a lot of great resources out there that I feel like not just on the contractor side, but just people in general
It's
that
at
will be
work
great.
in pretty much every business. I
Yeah.
worked with a real estate development company. I worked with a building management company. It's more alike than not alike. Yes,
Hmm.
it is geared towards contractors, absolutely. But for anyone who just wants to get some information in what you've heard today,
Hmm.
then I would go to the number 7 powercontractor.com. That is my website. If you go to the blogs, and yes, I know I wrote them, but there's a lot of really good information. And I have such a depth and experience that you'll be able to search those topics. There's some short videos that go with them. So there's a lot of good free stuff. There's some guidelines and things of that nature. And then my book, which is painfully small, which is very hard to do, Jay. Believe me, it's extraordinarily hard. I had 100 times that much that I could have put in a book. Yeah. And it's so, really, I actually had to have my editor, and I told my editor, if my contractors can't read this in 2 to 4 hours, we missed our target. I said, they can always get more information. They can always go to wherever that is. But that's what I want them to be able to do. And I also want them to read it over and over, which they do. That's really, so you get more depth of knowledge when you revisit that kind of thing. So that's my recommendation.
I love that. I love that so much. ending on some of the thoughts here, where do you see the future of like the contracting space and industry going in the next 5, 10 years? Or just say 5 years, because
Yeah, I
10
would
years we
tell you,
might be still around.
yeah, businesses were growing, people were more aware of it. It was all going, and then a little thing called COVID happened.
Yes.
At first, we were thinking, "Wow, this is an existential event here," in terms of
Mhm.
going in service. But actually, it turned out to be the best thing in the world for us because you're trapped at home flushing your toilet all day. Well, that means work for us, and so we really landed. And also, what happened is private equity, PE money,
Mm.
flooded into our segment, which had not happened since the 90s. In the 90s, they were in with a lot of stock market money, but that kind of busted out. And now is instead had realized restaurants was what they really wanted, turnkey restaurants or pizza joints, if you want. Those were closing down, or they couldn't serve their pop, they couldn't do whatever it is. Home services became for the contractors who really had their stuff together and enough scale together. So many of the people that I work with were able to take really great career, life-changing, family generational wealth money because they were the more attractive company. It wasn't the person they were buying. They were buying a company that could run without that person, let alone be there.
I like that. I like that. And the biggest thing we talk about is this concept of, and it's kind of the name of the business, info profit. Is
Mhm.
basically being able to take an insight and create something out of it that's rewarding, right? So from that, I want to just ask, what's one piece of insight you would love to leave the listeners who are hearing this? They're understanding specifically what you're talking about. They're going to take a look at these different seven powers and just the overall infrastructure. What's one piece of advice you would like to leave people with?
I have been lucky enough to work with some of what I consider the best contractors all around the country and in Canada, personally one-to-one. And the 7 power scale, the 10 being off the charts great and one being or zero being nothing. You can't be a zero in any of those 7, but there's no one I've worked with that's a 10 out of 10. And my point being is you don't have to be. You can be, a 5 or 7 or whatever in these things as you go along and get better at them as you do. But that's really the of leaning into that because that will lead you to profitability
Mhm.
if you follow along that way and you practice that well enough. One of the areas I do not teach, which is why Ellen and I got together, she is the financial queen. And she was educating these guys to not read 5,000 pages of financials when really they needed a 3-page or like you talked about 11-point thing
Yeah.
to be able to look at. But you don't get that unless you've done the work at the ground level.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Al, more than you know, guys. I hope you got a lot of value out of this. Until the next time, please check out his page, his resources. I'm currently checking them out as well, too. Al, I want to say it was an honor. It was a pleasure, sir, and nothing but blessings for you. Okay.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. Bye, everyone.